Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Out of Isolation, the show where I go out into the real world to be a tour guide and show you the city that you can rediscover when you come back. And today I have a very special guest with us, Hugo. Say hello and introduce yourself, Hugo.
G'day. Yeah, I'm Hugo. I have been a tour guide in Melbourne for about 7 years now because I love it. I love showing people this vibrant, amazing city of Melbourne. So I'm happy that I can get to show you some of my favourite things today.
Thanks for that, Hugo. We are going to take a move and show you some street art. To give you an idea of where we are, that big tower yesterday, that's one of the twin towers that I was in my video yesterday showing you the prettiest toilets in Melbourne. But I want to show you just how amazing Melbourne is as a city. It's a place where you can just duck around a corner and see some incredible works of art. Our street art scene here in Melbourne is not to be beat. And that's why I have Hugo with me today to show us a few different pieces of street art. I'll be in the city, Hugo over in Richmond, and we'll be able to tell you about some of our favorite pieces. One of the things you have to do to find street art here is just keep looking around. And so as you walk down the laneways, all you have to do is just stop, look up, and there you have it. This little laneway here is just off Exhibition Street. That's the corner of Exhibition and Collins Street, right over there. And as you make your way down this street, you see some pretty incredible pieces, like this one right over here. I saw this piece going up actually. The artist is putting this in, installed the drywall, used that kind of cement stuff all around it to get it all up, and it's been there for the better part of a year and a half. One part, the piece that didn't get to stay up for quite as long is this one. Behind me, you'll see Alice going down the rabbit hole with the rabbit just over here. We're looking at his watch. When the artist put this in, the idea was that that checkerboard pattern was going to extend all across the street down here. And so when you look at the street, you'll actually see that checkerboards right there that all came out here and went literally across the entire way. It's a pretty impressive work of art. The city, though, took some issue with it because the city of Melbourne came through with power washers, and this entire street, which had previously been covered in checkerboard, got power washed away. Caused a little bit of a controversy for a day or so. And then we moved on because that's the thing that's so powerful about street art. Pieces like this are able to be seen only right now, only temporarily. And so it's something that I really appreciate about the nature of street art. What do you think, Hugo?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, John, about that kind of transient, ephemeral nature of street art. And that's the major appeal, isn't it? It leads to that question that we always get asked on tours. Who decides who paints where, you know? What are the rules? And for a lot of Melbourne, there really is no rules. There are certain designated practice laneways of Melbourne, and there are certain laneways that we'll be seeing later on in this video, Duckboard Place in particular, which are kind of reserved for, let's just say, the more established street artists. But there's this kind of unwritten rule that you shouldn't go over someone else's work unless you can improve on it. But, I mean, that begs the question, who decides what work is better? So we constantly see this shifting landscapes of colours, of styles, of different artists, and I think that's why we love it.
Yeah, you know what, Hugo, the points that you're making about kind of the temporary nature of street art, it's the same thing that I love as well. When you look at even the media that's used in street art, stuff like spray paint cans or stencils or paste ups, all of these things are temporary in nature. It gives that kind of fleeting vibe to the street art because only you, watching it right now, are able to see the art that you're seeing. It's one of the things that I think people get excited about this area. So you see paste ups. A paste up is like a poster, I'll show you in just a moment, where you take basically a mixture of water and paste and you use like a roller, like a painting roller thing. You go ksh, 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 ksh. Nowadays, it's mostly been adapted into ads. And so we see lots of advertisements around here like the ones just behind me. If you come up close to them, I'm not going to feel as badly about doing this, you'll notice that it actually rips right off. And that piece will be gone in a week anyway because people doing ads come in all the time. But it's not just something used for ads. Artists will use that as well. The other thing that you see is you see a lot of this, tagging. So this is a classic example of kind of the bubble letters that the graffiti evolves into. When people start out, they usually start out with something a bit more like, where did it go? That, see a little black writing there? It's a little bit more classic way that you start out with a tag. It evolves into those bubble letters and then beyond. Something that drives me crazy is that I hear people all the time on my tours look at a beautiful piece, like for example, this one just behind me, and someone will come and do a tag right on top of that, and they'll say, oh, that's too bad. You shouldn't have done that. Now this beautiful piece is ruined. And I have to say, no, that's what's so great about street art, is that you can kind of make, you can see the pieces as they are right now, but there's no guarantee you'll see them next time. If not for those tags, we wouldn't see this constantly rejuvenated space.
Oh, John, the Banksy.
Oh, yes, just behind me over here. So, over here is the Banksy. Hugo, why don't you talk about the Banksys over here?
Well, Melbourne really gained this reputation as the stencil capital of the world in the late 90s, and artists like Banksy, who, if you're not aware, is probably the most famous street art artist in the world, has come out to Melbourne a few times. In 2003, he did these rats here, these stencils, and Banksy's work often has a political message to them. He's often commenting on kind of society, capitalism, and maybe even the like toxic aspects of our modern society, and hence that's where these rats come into play. So these are probably the best preserved Banksys in Melbourne today.
Yeah, it's not bad. They're pretty cool things. Actually, there's a great story about what happened to one of the Banksys. Do you want to talk, Hugo, about the little diver piece and what happened to it?
Quite controversial. So again, in 2003, when Banksy was here, he did a stencil of a diver about 1 meter tall. So quite a larger work for Banksy, larger than those rats we've just seen. And a piece of perspex was put up over the top of that artwork in an attempt to preserve it by the building's owners. Later that year, in the same year that piece of perspex was put up, someone came with a can of pink paint and poured it behind that artwork, ruining it. And it was like to the shock and horror of many here who were like, that's a Banksy, how could that person do such a thing? But it was also a bit of an act of rebellion, because art, as we've just discussed, street art, is this transient thing. It's not permanent. And the idea that someone could come along and try and preserve street art, but at the same time, you know, kind of decide what art was worth keeping, it got probably this artist, and we can only assume it was a fellow artist, a bit riled up. So I like that kind of active rebellion, and I'm sure Banksy would have as well. It's a bit rock and roll.
Well, I'll tell you what, one thing that's not going anywhere is this one just behind me.
Yeah, isn't this an incredible work?
What do you know about the piece, Hugo?
Yeah, that's a work by Fintan McGee. Some people even say Fintan is the Australian Banksy. He's certainly very prolific, been all over the world doing pieces like this in that signature style. You might be able to even see the drips in his artwork. Often you don't want your work to drip, but Fintan does this deliberately, gives his work a sense of gravity. Again, Fintan's work often has an environmental or social message. This one is of his childhood friend from back home though.
Yeah, it's definitely one of Melbourne's showiest pieces over there. Meanwhile, we're coming down here. That's Malcolm. My friend Malcolm over here. Malcolm Young sadly died last year, one of the founding members of AC/DC. One of the other founding members is just coming out the wall here, Bon Scott, singing. And the reason that we have so many kind of rock pieces here is because just behind this little door, where the man, I think it's Frank Zappa right over there actually, where he's on the door, is one of the best rock venues in Melbourne. We have lots of rock things and all that tip full of bricks, because just over here there's a big construction project going on. Up until just last year, this was the site of one of the best rock venues in Melbourne called the Cherry Bar. They were evicted by the landlords, but they've actually been sent just a block away from here. It's known as the place to go where you can get that kind of sticky floor vibe of a kind of grunge rock and roll venue. The place itself, this entire laneway, is AC/DC Lane. It used to be called Commercial Road, or Commercial Lane. The city changed it. This piece just went up recently, actually. I like this quite a bit. See that? It looks photorealistic, but someone's already tagged over the top of it. Does that person tagging over the top of it disrespect it? What do they think? We don't really know. Hugo, why don't you talk to me a little bit about the pieces that you have over in your neck of the woods? What do we have behind you right now?
Yeah, thanks, John. Check out this incredible piece. This piece is by an artist called Mike Macatron. in the suburb here of Richmond. Now, if you know anything about Richmond and football, that's Australian football, you'll know that the Richmond Football Club's mascot is a tiger. So there's a good reason that is there.
Hey Hugo, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? I just want to show off something quite culturally relevant. I don't know who's been watching The Mandalorian, but we have not one but 2 baby Yodas right over here on the street. So, Mandalorian's that Star Wars TV show on Disney Plus, and this artist called Lush Sucks. You can see him actually. This is his tag. Lush Sucks right there. He's big on Instagram. Came out to the big Baby Yoda and then the little one with Elton John. That was right around the time that Elton John came and played earlier this year. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, Hugo.
No worries. Well, Mike is often doing works with a natural element or animals in particular. So it's no coincidence that there is a tiger here. But again, going back to the mascot for the football club here, it's a very tribal and passionate pursuit by many Melburnians is the support of their football team. And you might be able to see that tiger is holding, that is an AFL football. And if we zoom in, just make sure I don't get run over here. If we zoom in to this football, we can see the words on it, Man Grook. There we go. Now the reason Man Grook is written on that ball, that is an ancient indigenous game. That is actually where the modern foundation of Australian rules football was born. So there's a nice connection there between the indigenous culture and modern Australian sporting culture as well.
Thanks for that, Hugo. So I'm now crossing Russell Street. To give you an idea, just down over there is Flinders Street, Federation Square. It's just over on the opposite corner down that way. But something that's all around here is old textile factories. Hidden behind one of these textile factories is probably the best known street art laneway, a place that any tourist who's done any research on Lonely Planet or TripAdvisor will know to come to. So that's where we're going to end our video today, at Hosier Lane. Hosier Lane's kind of the capital of street art. There's lots of pretty incredible pieces. It's also been a place of a lot of controversy in the last year when a retail shop here in Australia called Culture Kings opened up. It's been about a year and a half now since they opened. People got pretty upset about it. So if you look down at the laneway here, let's come over this way. So just there is the entrance to Culture Kings. They opened, and for a long time, this laneway has just been known as the place to come for really incredible street art pieces. They opened to try to trade and make some money off this, and what they did is they started having celebrity appearances. So they'd have, I think Post Malone came, and oh gosh, the name of the basketballer, the 76ers player for the NBA.
Ben Simmons.
Yeah, that guy. He came here and did an appearance. And whenever they'd make an appearance, they would go right over there and make the celebrity's image appear on the wall. People didn't really like that in this laneway very much, so they saw it as a bit too commercial. And so as a result, some of the street art community would come down here and they would put in big letters, bleep, Culture Kings. I know I've got kids watching right now. They'd curse about Culture Kings and talk about how they're destroying the culture of Hosier Lane, even in spite of the name. So anyway, that's a little bit about Hosier Lane. The place I want to take us out today, though, is with one of my favorite pieces in this laneway. An artist named Adnate, years ago, did one of our most iconic pieces, which you can see right there. Hugo, why don't you tell us a little bit about Aboriginal Boy?
Yeah, isn't this work amazing? So Matt Adnate is the artist here. He has been all over the world with a particular focus in recent times on Indigenous people and like profiling their culture. Now this is of a young Indigenous boy from the Wurundjeri tribe, one of the 5 tribes of the Kulin Nation. People who call this area home and have done so for about 100,000 years. So that is reflected in the piece here. So even the colours themselves, using those very earthy, we might even say indigenous colours. And that boy is looking out towards today what is the sporting precinct of Melbourne. Now that is a sacred meeting place for the Wurundjeri people. There is even a skyline reflected in the eyes of that child. Those eyes took Adnate, or Matt, about half a day to do. There's an incredible amount of detail in those eyes, reflecting this kind of modern city of Melbourne, while at the same time recognizing our Indigenous roots. So yeah, quite an incredible piece.
Yeah, it's an incredible piece. It's definitely worth coming down to. And just in general, once we are all out of isolation, there's so many great places to come for street art. I've only just shown you, Hugo and I have just shown you a fraction of the street art here in Melbourne. If you'd like to see more for yourself, one of my favorites things to do is to go over to the City of Melbourne's visitor center, or just Google Melbourne Street Art Map. And there are lots and lots of places, lots and lots of laneways like this that you can come to and explore a little bit more. That's about it for me today, guys. I'm just returning down to the bottom of Hosier Lane now, where Federation Square is behind me, the Forum Theater over that way. Thank you all for joining in. My name is John, his name is Hugo. We have just been here with Out of Isolation, our daily web show to give us tour guides something to do. If you yourself are a tour guide out of work and want to participate as well, please reach out to me and we will get you on the video. Watch for our video tomorrow. Thank you and good day.
See you guys.